So, always sitting, hunched up and absorbed, reading anything in the corridor without even daring to ask permission to enter the study room because frightened by the critical looks of my colleagues, I easily aroused the curiosity or at least the attention of anyone, much more that of the professor, who were not used to a student as disciplined and studious as myself. I had no friends. Sabrina and Roberta only existed in university for a few hours a week. I didn't have lunch or walk to the faculty. I didn't even have the patience to stretch my legs a little for the stairs when I was not following the various weekly courses. I usually stayed to study at university because at home I was easily distracted with cartoons or with my thinking games. Only as the exam dates approached did I lock myself in my room to follow a rigid review program that would lead me safely enough to the fateful day. Nonetheless, most of the professors took a liking to me. There was a big professor who had given a welcome to my father on my first day at Frederick II University, who would who more than once asked me as I passed by my name what I was doing there all the time, and even began to invite me for some quick chat in his studio. Over the years, it would become one of my own university friends, but by then I was still looking around and trying to find someone I could really trust. Who knows, maybe I was still unconsciously looking for security in more adult and stable figures who could replace the perpetually absent support of my parents. I remember my French teacher, a middle-aged gay man who was immediately captivated by my character and by the fact that I expressed myself so extremely well in the language subjects he assigned us to evaluate our grammatical expertise. More than once it was almost certain that she was shamelessly swooning me, uh, which contributed to my instinctive loathing for all clingy humans. I would clearly never ever manifest the slightest resentment in his presence. He was a man. He was greedy for attention, for confirmation, for protection against the specter of loneliness and rejection from my other peers. But part of me continued to feel the lack of a male partner in my life. I was very unfortunate from this point of view because there were almost no members of my same sex, and I just started to feel the weight of the classes advantage towards being altogether anomalous in terms of sex, behavior, intelligence, and sensitivity. From the early years, I had a special friendship with English readers, who were the ones I frequented with more assiduity, and who immediately noticed my behavioral disturbances, my methodological asociality. In a certain sense, they took me under their protection, because at first I didn't even answer their questions in the classroom in words, and I had the right to prepare myself in silence for exams, since I still didn't have the right confidence in pronunciation and syntax to express myself in their language, specific language. Among the many hundreds of girls with smattering of English, French, Spanish, and German due to high school studies, I was the only one who, in the chosen languages, the first two, was not even sure of the pronunciation of most of the words. What was I doing? That a Greek course who surely knew more about Cicero and Herodotus than about Shakespeare and the sea. In short, this was one more point that brought me closer to the sympathy of my mother tongue teachers. Over time, I would have become so attached to them that I would almost consider them my second mothers or first mothers, given the ever more evident departure from my natural one. In the meantime, I was under the illusion of being a special and isolated star student on top of a kind of pedestal. Yes, the latter distanced me from all human warmth, but at the same time, it also elevated me to the prevailing banality of my colleagues. I had another friend professor in a little 60-year-old who represented a sort of auto-tune in the pretentious and decorous elite of the corpus of ordinary teachers. Her name was Berardi, and she was fond of Oriental philosophy, Although she usually held annual seminars on secondary culture of English medieval and Renaissance literature, it was easy for me to establish a special relationship with her from day one. I was one of the very few to attend their courses, also because they were held at impossible times and were not binding for the end of year exam. Always loyal to my duty and obsessed with the belief that to get excellent results, I had to follow, like it or not, every single course on the guide. Not infrequently I found myself alone with my hippie teacher talking about philosophy, Buddhism, approaches to the correct awareness of the individual spirit. Perhaps from those first conversations on the nature of the ego and of life, I began to be passionate about an original way of doing philosophy, more similar to the spontaneous and strict one of Socrates, so to speak, than to academic one of an Aristotle. Thanks to Berardi's passionate and not always shareable guide, I imagined a world in which I myself could clarify my interpretative qualities. Once the same teacher proposed to us as studies to write a treatise on what we thought through life and the structuring of reality. For my part, an 8-page essay came out at Mayfair to the point of reading it in class and praised it as the first work of future genius of Western thought. Obviously, that eccentric like to exaggerate. Hardly anyone followed their courses because many publicly questioned her sanity. For me, however, it didn't take much to feel appreciated and imagining a future Nobel Prize winner. Who knows what abstruse intellectual discipline. The guidelines for my interpretation of reality, however, were drawn. Essential to my vision of the world was the illusion of matter. I applied the Einstein's theory of relativity to every slightest sensory experience of the arrangement to the point of explaining in detail the non-existence of the pebble of the pen that I weighed in the palm of my hand. Even more, that appeared to me as the only real bulwark on the edge of a life reduced to a mere ghost, which could lead us to the unveiling of the universal soul. Ap- Apparently mysterious and chaotic theories and deduction, which nevertheless would have served as support plans for the more technically elaborate essays that I would have dealt with in the empty post-university years. Basically, in the first year of university studies, the first seeds of my intellectual innocence were planted. While I was slowly dying for material life, I desperately clung to any intellectual strand that could justify the existence of that useless being which tired and slumped he read alone in the corridor. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.